Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here today. My name is Megan. I'm an adult services librarian here at the Santa Clara City Library. Just a few housekeeping things before we start. Emergency exits, you hopefully won't need them, but if you do, they're right outside the door to the right. If you need bathrooms or water, they're down the hallway to the left. And just so you know, this event is being recorded. You're not being recorded, like the audience isn't being recorded, but just so you know, we are recording this. Okay, so if you did not know, the Santa Clara City Library is a recipient of this year's NEA Big Read grant. This project is supported in part by the National Endowment for the Arts, which you can find on the web at arts.gov. The NEA Big Read program is also in partnership with Arts Midwest. And specifically, we want to acknowledge and thank our Santa Clara City Library Foundation and friends for their generous support in making today's program possible. If you're not familiar with our foundation, they provide essential grant funding and enable special programming at the library to foster learning, discovery, and community engagement. There are many ways to support the foundation. We actually have a flyer on the table. You can check it out before you leave. But I also wanted to introduce today, we have our executive director in attendance, Joanne Davis. So thank you for being here. And if you have, woo. And so also if you're interested in getting involved or finding out how to support the library, you can talk to Joanne after the program. Another special guest I want to recognize is Alex Navarro from Second Harvest, Silicon Valley. Thank you, Alex. Oh, and Mary Dow. Perfect. Hi, Mary. So Second Harvest is one of our key partners for this year's NEA Big Read programming. They're actually going to be doing a really cool cooking demonstration and writing workshop combo series later this year. Again, we have information on the table if you're interested. So just wanted to say thank you for that. And if you're interested, you can also visit the website up here for more information. Okay, so now that I got all the housekeeping stuff out of the way, the reason that you are really here, I'd like to introduce our special guest. So as you probably know, the Santa Clara City Library has chosen the beautiful collection of essays, Bite by Bite, as our big read for Santa Clara this year. This book explores the connection between food and memory and is gorgeously illustrated by the artist Fumi Mini Nakamura. But today we are thrilled to welcome the author of this book, Aimee Nezhukumatathil, to Santa Clara. Aimee is an author and a poet who has written 2 illustrated collections of essays. So in addition to Bite by Bite, she also wrote World of Wonders several years ago, which was a Barnes & Noble Book of the Year. She's also written 4 award-winning poetry collections. Her next poetry book, Night Owl, will be out in March. She also co-authored a chapbook with the poet Ross Gay, who I noticed made several appearances in Bite by Bite and some of your food stories. Her writing has appeared in the Best American Poetry series, the New York Times Magazine, ESPN, the Paris Review, and more. Her honors include a poetry fellowship from U.S. Artist Fellows, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Pushcart Prize, a Mississippi Arts Council grant, and a Guggenheim Fellowship, and more, but I couldn't list all of her awards. As you can see, Aimee is extremely talented. We're very lucky to have her here today, and so I'm going to stop talking so you can listen to Aimee talk. So welcome, Aimee. Thank you for being here.
Hello, hello. Okay, good morning, everybody. I am so happy to be here. I cannot tell you, I was just telling the librarians today that this date has been on my calendar written in glitter ink. That's all the good stuff. All the bad stuff is just in black. So this has been on my calendar for a while. I'm so grateful to the entire library staff, Libraries are such a huge foundation of my entire life. And I get verklempt just talking about it. So I promise I'm not going to turn into a puddle of tears here. But when I was a young girl growing up and bouncing around from town to town to town in the 80s and 70s, libraries were my one constant. So to be here, to be talking to you about one of my books, I never thought, first of all, that one of my books would be in a library, unless I slipped it in there in notebook paper. So, and librarians in particular, I wanted to give a shout out because they were the ones who never faltered with any questions I had about narwhals or rambutan. And I would be in the library until they flickered the lights off and said, Aimee, it's time. They would come on the speaker, Aimee, it's time to make a selection. So I say all of that because I just feel at home, even though this is my first time in Santa Clara, anytime I see libraries, it's just my happy place. So what I'm going to do for you all today, I'm going to make sure we have time for questions. I have a small little slideshow to give you, and then I'm going to read a little bit from Bite by Bite, and then we'll wrap it up with some discussion questions up here. I also have mango laptop or water bottle stickers for anybody who asks questions. And I'm happy to sign books up here as well. And you can only get these mango stickers at one of my events as well. So last year, I think I had echalots and narwhals the previous year. So this year it's a mango. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to play this little video for you. I think the volume is going to be okay. I just want you to, this is like kind of my metaphor for how I chose this writing life here. And it's one of my favorite, actually it is my favorite amphibian called the pebble frog. Does anybody here know the pebble frog? Yes, okay. All right, here we go.
On a mountain plateau, a mile above the jungles of South America, lives another daredevil. The pebble toad is only a few centimeters long. This little toad can't hop, which could be a problem when it comes face to face with its arch enemy, the tarantula. Not held back by its shortcomings, this tiny toad tenses its muscles and turns itself into a rubber ball. Being so small and weighing so little means bouncing doesn't hurt at all. Not being able to hop doesn't stop him getting down, but it would make life a whole lot easier on the way back up.
Okay, that was my buddy, the pebble frog. All right. One thing, actually, here we go. 1 second. One thing about the pebble frog's journey that I just love so much about its moxie in the amphibian world is notice that even when the pebble toad it thinks they know where they're going and is on the path, and there's some sort of surprise element, in this case, the tarantula. The pebble toad is able to notice he doesn't just like go away. He finds another way to get back into the light and to keep on climbing, you know? And I just love that. First of all, it's so funny. I just love the kind of the comedy of the music going through, but also there's something so special about this frog, who is actually one of the most resilient of all the frogs in the amphibian world. And what I love about this is that I think of this pebble frog when I think back to my journey being a writer. As I told you, I grew up in libraries so much, but my parents were in the medical field. And we didn't, this makes it sound like I had a sad childhood, but I promise it wasn't. They did not buy me a single book. I actually can't remember a single book that they bought me. I had Reader's Digest and National Geographic magazines from my dad, and that was it, because their rationale, coming in from the Philippines and India is why books? We have the library, that kind of thing. And so, and to their credit, no matter how much they worked, they always found time to take me to the library. And now children's literature is amazing. But I want to tell you, back then in the 70s, it was a little bit lacking. I will tell you that, the books that were given to me initially were things like Dick and Jane went to the bakery. Jane bought a cake. Jane dropped her cake. Let's help Jane find another cake. And, I remember so palpably, even as a kid, thinking Jane is a moron, And so my true adventure was in the nature section. I loved hearing about people who explored volcanoes, discovering new dinosaur bones, things like that. That's where the adventure, that's where the drama happened, actually. And I guess I just never stopped being that girl sitting on the floor of the library, all the way until fast forward until junior year in college. At that point, I had never met a living writer, and I went to good high schools, and I did the whole AP thing. We were never taught that there were any living poets ever. So it was just by happenstance that I happened to see a poem in a study lounge. And I was floored by it. Emily Dickinson has this quote, and I'm going to butcher it here, but it goes, "If I read something and it makes me feel so warm or so cold, no fire could ever warm me, I know that that is poetry. If I read something and it feels like the top of my head were taken off, I know that that is poetry." Folks, that's what it felt like when I read this little handout. When I was, struggling, I was on the struggle bus in organic chemistry. I tacked it up to my dorm room or my dorm bulletin board and said, "Whose handout is this? Someone please help me. I need to know, what is this from? Is this from a class?" And a few hours later, a hockey player down the hall knocked on my door and said, "Hi, that's my homework. I need it for class. By the way, it's called a poem." That's how bad my contemporary literature, education was. I did not know that was a poem. I was like, wait, what? This is a class you could take? You could read more like this, and then someone will actually teach you to write your own poems? What is this, majestic class experience, And he's like, "It's poetry 101. And you can, at that point I was asking him, "Can I follow you to class? Can I just see what's going on?" He just made me follow a little bit behind him. So I think I was a little too exuberant. But the teacher, bless their heart, as they say in the South, the professor let me sit in the back. And I said, "I promise I won't bother you. I'm a chemistry major. I just want to see how this class works." And folks, that next week was spring break of junior year. Now, if you are pre-medicine, what tests do you have to take your junior year in spring? Does anyone know? The MCATs. So this is, to this day, the most rebel kind of thing I've ever done in my life. I skipped the MCATs. I went to the movies, and I basically cried through the movies with my best friend. What did I just do? Da, 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 da. After I got out of the movie, I went to my guidance counselor, switched from honors chemistry pre-med to generic English with no plans for the future, no safety net, nothing. And then I had to face my parents on spring break, who had prepared this enormous Indian Filipino cuisine. "Our future daughter has been studying so hard. Soon she'll be, buying meals for us, da da da." And I just suffered through the whole meal. My heart was racing like crazy. How in the world am I going to do this? And I sat them down over after dinner, and I broke the news to them that not only did I not take the MCATs, and I could see the kind of the confusion spread over their face. Not only did I not take the MCATs, but I switched out of honors chemistry, and I was not planning on ever being a doctor, and also that I loved poetry and I would like to study how to be a poet. So those are the 5 most nightmarish scenarios to tell immigrant Asian parents, basically. At least my parents in the 90s, early 90s. And so my mother got up. She's very boisterous Filipino, still is. Started slamming kitchen cabinets, that kind of thing. My father, a very stoic, gentle South Asian man, started weeping. Folks, I tell you, I've seen him weep 3 times. One, when he was walking me down the aisle, tears of joy. Another time when I placed his first grandchild in his hands, tears of joy. And the third is when I told him I wanted to be a poet, tears of confusion and dismay, So, but now I say all of this with kind of a smile and joking. And now they're so embarrassing. They're my biggest fans. And they're constantly texting me ideas for poems, sometimes in the middle of my lectures on campus. But I will tell you that I just never had anybody from, I don't know, age 3 to 19 ever ask me, Aimee, what actually sets you on fire? What actually do you want to study? Do you want to study? And it's such an extraordinarily easy question, but just literally no guidance counselor, no parent, no elder, nobody ever asked me what I wanted to. Because if they did, I would have told them I love reading and writing. And I was just going through the motions of trying to do chemistry. Also, I wanted to how nobody noticed this. I, to this day, have never been able to light a Bunsen burner by myself. So that should have been a red flag to everybody. Why was I trying to be a chemistry major? It terrified me. And I always say my greatest contribution is to humanity is to not become a doctor, because I saved so many lives that way. So I wanted to just give you that as like kind of a little bit of a background. I wanted to show you this moment as well. My senior year in high school, you're looking at Ohio royalty here, folks. This is a big football day here, but that's okay because I wanted to be at Santa Clara. I was the first female football mascot in the state of Ohio. Thank you very much. Thank you. This picture is from our yearbook. I did not have it yet, but it was a basketball player in the off season until tryouts. And they had a whole rigmarole where you had to sign a waiver. You can't tell who the mascot is. But I had girls because they all thought I was a basketball player who would be like, hey, Bucky, what are you doing after the game? I was like, first of all, you know that I'm 5'4". But so they ended up putting a little bow on my head, so I became Bucket Beaver. Anyway, so there's that. I wanted to just flash back again that night when I told my parents that I wanted to be an English major and study poetry with no job prospects in mind. I could hear them argue. I went to bed. I was like crying. I could hear them arguing in the kitchen. My mother said, this is, to my father, this is all your fault. You let her be Mickey Mouse, and now she wants to be a poet. They never understood this was a beaver. They kept calling this Mickey Mouse. So anyway, all right. This I'm not sure you can see with the Zoom thing up here, but it says, this is me in my favorite place, my parents' rose garden. And again, it makes it sound like it's so lonesome, but I just feel like that was the most magical childhood. I was left alone so many times. I had a younger sister, but the two of us were left alone. My parents were very much not playing with us, not reading to us. They just kind of let us out loose in the backyard. And I just played with mud and sticks and bugs. And yes, I got bit. And yes, I fell out of trees. But I will tell you this. I go and visit schools now all over the country, actually all over the world. And not that I'm staring at little kids' knees, but one thing that I've noticed in the last 20 years is the amount of like scrapes and cuts and scraped up knees and elbows and things like that. I almost never see that anymore. And the reason is because many kids are just not outside playing anymore. And I'm not an anti-screen person. I love social media, that kind of thing. But when you're 3.5 years old and you're staring at a screen, you lose the ability to kind of figure out, is this a tree I should be climbing? What is that star that's glowing so brightly? You know, that kind of thing, that sense of wonderment. Shoot, and I want to see, is there any way to get the Zoom stuff off? I just don't remember, just so that we could see. We're going to change it up just a little bit, because this is focusing on bite by bite. I wanted to, and I know there's some writers in the room, or maybe like me, you were maybe you also never had someone ask you, what do you actually like to do? Maybe you were always like hiding your ability to write or wanting to write, that kind of thing. Maybe you were never given the chance. This is one of the easiest but most fun kind of things to write about. And all you need, what I love about writing is that I'm pretty old school with this. I love a pencil and I love a composition notebook. That's all you need. That's the best like 50 cents that you could do with an art. Everything else, you need a $12,000 harp or, a lot of expensive art supplies. With writing, you need a pencil and a notebook. So I teach college now at the University of Mississippi, and oftentimes I come across students who never get asked kind of their feelings or about memory or anything like that. And I found that, as you can imagine, I'm in a pretty red state, but the campus itself is a little blue dot in a very red state. But one thing that I found that we do have some common ground with is talking about food. Everybody can have like memories of their favorite grandma's dish, or the way an uncle prepared this special sauce only on Thanksgiving, you know, that kind of thing. And when that starts opening up, I see people from all backgrounds and all beliefs coming together because we want to be all sitting at the same table. Tell me about your aunt's recipe. Tell me about what those cookies tasted like. This is not to at all put our heads in the sand and say, hey, there's some very real differences and things like that. But I will tell you that food in particular is the one thing that I've seen that softens people. It makes us all a little bit tender. And I think if we could at least start from a place of tenderness, then the real work can be done, you know, that kind of thing. So these are just a few simple questions. If you haven't written this down, you might just take a few moments this weekend to do it. You don't have to show it to anybody. You don't need to make it into a poem or a giant essay. But just as a reflection, you'd be surprised, especially when you're working with your hands, what you forgot you actually do remember, you know, that kind of thing. And I will also say, with this, and I'm trying not to be verklempt here too, these are some questions too that I wish I asked. I lost my my last maternal or paternal grandmother in 2020 from old age, not COVID, but we weren't able to go see her in India because of the travel restrictions. And I will tell you that every piece of writing that she's done in her handwriting is like worth more to me than any gold. So if you are someone who is like, I don't know, I'm having trouble connecting with another generation or anything, just ask them to write something in their handwriting. It's better than any email, any text, even any picture, just to see them carefully write some things. And I have some precious, I've asked my poor grandmother, she's 4'8". She was 4'8". And I asked her, like, Grandma, what is your favorite smell in India? Can you tell me your favorite smell? And she would tell me things like, it's when the butterflies shimmer right before monsoon, or the cinnamon plants are shaking. And I was like, Grandma, can I borrow that for a poem? Like, she never went to college, but she speaks in metaphor and things like that. So just, if you are lucky enough to have elders in your life, please do ask them these so-called simple questions and ask if they might be able to write them down. I promise you, when they're gone, that's going to be such a special treasure to have. Can you imagine, like, knowing what your grandma's favorite meal is in her handwriting, you know, that kind of thing? All right, move on. Okay. My first book of essays was on wonderment. And yeah, this is, I know, sorry. It's all right. And maybe that could be like up on the top or something. Yeah, great. This is a visual poem by a poet named Laura Gilpin. And this was inspired actually on a trip to my husband's hometown, actually to his grandparents' hometown. And I have my brother-in-law and his family here, so I want to give a shout out to Kansas. I do this all the time. I didn't do this just for you all. But in Logan, Kansas, there is a museum, and there is actually a two-headed calf. So I used to teach this poem a lot to my students. I thought, well, maybe this is not real exactly, you know, that kind of thing. No, I saw it with my own eyes here. I'll just read this out for you. And I love this poem as a moment of wonderment, and just to kind of imagine something outside of our own little bubbles, you know, things like that. Two-headed calf by Laura Gilpin. Tomorrow, when the farm boys find this freak of nature, they will wrap his body in newspaper and carry him to the museum. But tonight, he is alive and in the north field with his mother. It is a perfect summer evening. The moon rising in the orchard, over the orchard, the wind in the grass. And as he stares into the sky, there are twice as many stars as usual. And I just love that moment of wonderment. And I wanted to talk about wonder real quick because it ties in, even though that was the subject of my first book, it ties into Bite by Bite. Wonder for me is that curiosity, but with a smile, like you want to learn about something. And what I feel like there's so many hurts going on in this world because of a lack of wonder. And then what I mean by that is a lack of wanting to know about other things, other people, other cultures, other towns, other plants, other animals, just to have that curiosity that maybe you had like me when we were sitting on the floor of the library, you know, that kind of thing. What I found so interesting is that the same root of the word wonder is actually the root of the word for smile in German. So what I love about that, that combination is that it's not just wondering or letting your mind be astonished a little bit, but that you actually find a joy in that learning, you know? So I ask you, the audience, like, when is the last time you actually had that wonderment, that joy of learning, the true joy of learning, not for a class, not for a test, but that you couldn't actually wait to learn more about it? I don't care if it's sports scores, sports histories, something about a car, a very unusual tomato, but when was that time that you had wonderment? It's something to just ponder, and maybe you could write about that as well. The other little writing prompt I wanted to give people, oops, sorry again, thank you, is these 5 questions. Oops, thank you. And they're, again, very simple, but I can't tell you how many students I see who are in need of mental health services, and many times and this is not just post-COVID, this is pre-2020. Literally, they have told me, Professor Nezhukumatathil, nobody has actually asked me what I'm afraid of or what I love. And honestly, I've never actually even been able to answer it until your class or until you ask these questions. So again, you don't need any creative writing background. This is just humans. This is just being a human. What do you actually love? I'm not talking about books or anything, but like, what do you love on this planet? But secondly, what do you fear? Can you actually articulate what it is you fear? My third question, that's the one I love asking people so much because I feel like it's so contagious. What do you wonder about? What do you have astonishment and awe and curiosity about? I love hearing, and maybe you've seen this in your own lives, I love hearing when people talk about something that they truly love or get, like, they want to learn more about. I suddenly want to learn about grasshoppers too then, or whatever, you know, or I just met an ornithologist in Utah earlier this week, and he was talking about belted kingfishers, which I have never seen before. And just hearing him for 2 minutes talk about a belted kingfisher, I was suddenly like, why don't I have a belted kingfisher shirt? I want all the belted kingfisher, everything, paraphernalia. I want them to be in Mississippi. I wish I could transplant them to Mississippi. That goes along with, can you name 5 things that you're curious about? I say this as a joke to my students, but if you are on a date with someone and they cannot come up with one thing that they're curious about, red flag, okay? You need to have some interest about something in your life. I don't care how hot they are. You need to be able to have some curiosity about the world. And what if you shared them with somebody? What if you shared them with, like, I don't know, that friend that you've been meaning to text or to go out to coffee with, but you never actually do, or share them with a neighbor or a sibling. Hey, do you remember we used to pluck dandelions and make them into a braid? Do you remember that? Just that small little bit of tenderness, that small little bit of turning yourself tender. Here's the thing about wonder, folks, is that when you have curiosity and wonderment in your life, it lets you be vulnerable with it, and it's a lot easier to share what you're curious about than to say, hey, I'm going to be vulnerable today, you know. But what that means is you're admitting, when you share something that you wonder about or are curious about, you are admitting, hey, I don't have all the answers. I would actually like to know more. And what happens is when we elect people who have no curiosity, or place them in power, people who think they're a know-it-all, folks, the people who are know-it-alls are the most insufferable people in your lives, I promise you. They don't admit that they have any, they cannot admit that they don't possess all the knowledge on the planet. And that's a scary, scary thing to be. So don't be like that. Those of you who have younger kids here in the audience, like, try to cultivate that curiosity, try to cultivate that wonderment, because what you're doing is you're cultivating people to be vulnerable and to share that vulnerability, to be tender. All right. I wanted to mention to you, this is just a small little thing. This past summer, I got, because I'm just basically a giant nerd, but I don't believe that there's always, I feel like a little bit like I'm quoting Hamilton lyrics here or something, but there's so much to always learn. I'm running out of time all the time. This is fireflies. This was taken in a field in Japan. But this past summer, I wanted to put my money where my mouth is. I became certified in Mississippi State Parks as a firefly guide because fireflies have always been my favorite insect. And instead of just ranting about it, I wanted to actually show people like why they're amazing and why we should protect them. And this summer, for the first time ever, we actually had people from Hawaii coming through to our little town in Mississippi where they have synchronous fireflies. It's one of 3 places in the country that has synchronous fireflies. And those are fireflies that blink. They do like a heartbeat in the forest. So it's a visual heartbeat. It's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And if some idiot with a cell phone comes around, then it resets for about 15 minutes. They all stay silent. They're like mad. And then after 15 minutes, they're like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's the most amazing thing. And folks, it's free. If you could ever get to Mississippi, I will be your personal guide through the woodlands. But you have to do it in late May or June. Okay. All right, those of you who are educators or people who just want to educate yourselves, something like that. I wanted to just take a quick moment to say that I was so grateful for all the classical poets and the classical nature writers that I read in the libraries, but we didn't have access to people who were living, who wrote books, and people who were different skin colors or who love differently or move differently. Every time I read a nature book, I get to the back page and it was usually a senior white male, and that was great. But I just felt like after a while, and I didn't have the vocabulary for it, but after a while I was like, oh, stay in your lane. There's no place for a brown girl outdoors or to write about it, that kind of thing. And so I just feel like if we read about the outdoors or about food from a variety of viewpoints, it can only be that much more vibrant. Like, why just read cookbooks or books on food writing from one type of person, that kind of thing. For the teachers in here, I would say just whatever you can do to get your students journaling and I know it sounds a little cheesy, but we need it so much more than ever, especially our boys. It's their only way for some of them that they can actually talk about feelings or fears or loves. So just get them, tell them you're not even going to read them. Just get them in a place to write. And then the final thing is to get off screens whenever possible. I realize that I'm doing this while I'm showing you a screen, but there you go. Because at the end of the day, when wonder becomes a practice, and by the way, I wanted to mention, I don't just wake up every day, especially these last 2 weeks, I feel like have been such heavy news weeks. But it's actually a practice. And, so I don't just wake up out of bed and say, today I will have astonishment and curiosity. It is something where I actually have to cultivate it, make sure that the things in my house cultivate that I set aside time. If I could doom scroll for a half an hour, then I should be able to be outside a half an hour and triple that, that kind of thing. Like, so everybody has their own time commitments and things like that, but wonder should also be a part of that as well. It's something, even 5 minutes to take a look at the sunset, 5 minutes to look at the sunrise. This is, I think, what was my main message throughout COVID, but I still maintain it in all of my nature writing classes at the university. You feel less alone because you realize we are all connected here, and everything in our media is doing everything we can to keep us separate and ourselves and just do our country alone, or me, myself, protect me, my family, that's it. And that's actually the most opposite unnatural thing. Nobody else in the natural world does that. Like, they all are symbiotic. They're all connected to each other. So it's actually super unnatural. And that should also be a red flag when you hear somebody say, we have to do this for ourselves, things like that. It's so unnatural. That was another one. And I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to give you a little snippet from my book. So that's the slide that I'm going to end on, and then let me take a dramatic drink of water real quick. Let's do this microphone. Great. Cell phone? Or is that actually like an owl message? See, if you were my student, at the university, if the phone rings, I answer it. And I either tell them what we're talking, what we're doing in class or not. So, but I was so ensorcelled by that music. By default, though, I walk over and answer the phone. You just have to in Mississippi. All right. Is this one on? All right, so this book, Bite by Bite, it is a collection of I wrote about 150 essays, and I whittled it down to 40. So that was painful. But what I meant by doing that, and I did this with World of Wonders as well, is I didn't want to whittle it down to these are the foods I'm the most expert in, but these are the foods that I'm the most curious about, that I could still be that girl sitting on the floor of the library reading all about the origins of shave ice or something like that. Like, these are the ones that I'm sure I will always be a student of for the rest of my days. And I am not a chef. Just like in World of Wonders, I was not a zoologist. But that also doesn't mean that we should only hear from chefs about food, or that we should only hear about the outdoors from scientists. I think one of the best ways to kind of bridge that gap is to have somebody else who happens to have a background in writing kind of bring those stories to life as well. I defer always to cooks, to scientists, and things like that, but I think I could tell a pretty good story myself with a little gift for metaphor, perhaps, that the biologists don't have. All this to say is I think I'm going to read to you a selection of, sorry, I lost the page. They're all divided into chapters here. Miracle. And I'm going to read to you from Miracle Fruit, which is a small little fruit. Has anybody had miracle fruit before? Not quite. All right. Good, excellent. Miracle Fruit, oh, and it's also, as it was mentioned before, it's all beautifully illustrated by Fumi Nakamura, who also illustrated World of Wonders. And it was really important to me to have an Asian American illustrator in a book by an Asian American. Again, these were books that I just did not see growing up. And I was so lucky that she agreed to read with me, or to collaborate with me. So Miracle Fruit looks like a jelly bean, and I'm not going to give too much detail, but when you bite it, a chemical reaction happens in your mouth for about 30 minutes. And one thing that drove me nuts about essays, essay collections, is, and oftentimes when they mention family, it always kind of turned me off a little bit, because at the time I didn't know that I would have a family. I have 2 young sons now, not so young sons. And I didn't know if I would get married. And a lot of these books that were written were very much like, I wasn't whole until I found a man, or I was not complete until I had kids, or I was not complete until XYZ, until I had a divorce. And I was like, what about just being yourself and just enjoying that? And there, I'll tell you, there was a dearth of narratives featuring women of color who were, heaven forbid, happy to be single and alone, and were thriving at that time. So the whole book is not about this. The whole book covers different chapters of my life, from toddlerhood all the way to last year. But I wanted to share this essay in particular. This kind of highlights being okay with just myself in my 20s. And no man saved me, no food saved me, no ring saved me, no kid saved me. And I think that's an important message to share for anybody, you know, that kind of thing. All right, and I didn't have to go somewhere to save myself. Well, this was it was like 5 hours away in New York City. Miracle Fruit. Once upon a time, I was considered ancient, almost 30 and not married. So old, too picky, I heard Auntie say in the kitchen. Something must be wrong with her. She's the oldest grandchild and still not married, always reading. Tisk tisk. But I had a job. I was tenure track and I was good at it. Turns out students love professors who are 26 and who genuinely care about them. I worked and saved and bought my own house. I could take care of my yard all by myself in scorching heat, wind, rain, and snow. My father had introduced me to Miracle Fruit a few years earlier in the late 90s. He bought his first shrub from a roadside stand in rural Florida, and when he was excitedly explaining it on the phone, I have to admit, I didn't quite believe him. Okay, Dad. Sure, Dad. You eat this berry, and anything you eat becomes sweet? I was more dubious because he said he hadn't yet tried it, as the shrub hadn't even made fruits yet, just had some flowers when he bought it. I assumed he got tricked or something was lost in the translation from the man on the side of the road he purchased it from. Let me see here. I talked to my parents pretty often, almost daily, and though they never said it, I think they were pretty worried about me all alone in my blue doll house, as they called it, with no plans to share it with anyone or anything. How about a bird like Chico? Their cockatiel. A bird will notice when you're gone. You have to practice taking care of something, Aimee. Sige na. That's Filipino, in case you didn't. But I was in no hurry. I was taking care of myself. I dated plenty during my undergrad and grad school years, and though I didn't have the words to explain it, it felt so good, if a little quiet sometimes, to have a place of my own, a writing room of my own, and no need to trudge out into icy parking lots with my laundry basket. That was the dream. So months later, when a friend in New York City called to tell me of a Miracle Fruit party happening in a club in a few weeks, I didn't even hesitate. With nothing to hold me down on weekends, I hopped a plane to see what the sweet fuss was all about. In the early 2000s, the Miracle Fruit berry started making headlines with its novel after effects. People were having flavor-tripping parties at homes, restaurants, and rooftop hangouts. The cardinal red berry of the Miracle Fruit plant is about the size of a coffee bean. It's native to tropical West Africa. And this unusual berry contains a protein called miraculin, which was first isolated by the scientist Kenzo Kurihara in 1968. His report showed how miraculin alters the actual taste receptors in the tongue so that after eating this berry for about 30 minutes, everything you eat becomes sweet. A lemon is as sweet as an orange, and a saltine cracker tastes like a cookie. And I'm not going to read the entire thing, but just a little bit more. The miracle fruit party I went to was in the back room of a restaurant long since shuttered. I didn't even remember the name of it, but the walls and maybe the lighting was red, the napkins were red, there was a giant painting of a bull above the bar. There are suggested foods for flavor tripping, but the ones we were served at the restaurant was a motley crew of a tray featuring pickles, carrots, goat cheese, Guinness beer, rings of fresh red onion, limes, and salt and vinegar chips. The host from the restaurant instructed us to take a single fruit and then chew it slowly, mashing it up and letting the berry juice coat your whole mouth for about a minute. And then the fun began. All of us, about a dozen of us gals, began sampling each one of the courses. Some noticed no changes at all with some of the foods. Some had brighter reactions to most everything, but kept calm. Some of us, I won't say who, had wild, over-the-top reactions to every ingredient, suddenly turning honeyed in their mouths. Until the Guinness. That was saved for last. Our host was hyping it up through the meal. It's dessert, you'll see. It's dessert. Everyone says it tastes like chocolate milkshake, dude. And even though our taste buds were clearly temporarily altered that evening, the beer was what we all cast our biggest doubts on. None of us at that flavor tripping party were partnered up, but we were oohing and ahhing all night long, studying one another's faces. And oh, that was the time when none of us had cell phones. I think a couple of us had a chunky something called a track phone that required a refillable card for emergencies. But that evening, we were just talking, eating, talking, hooting, and guffawing nonstop. And though each dish brought out exclamations of incredulity, goat cheese, more like cheesecake, that party was glorious. Those few years of being single were glorious. All night, we twisted our mouths into something ambrosial, delightful, and tender. I think we all knew it was fleeting as we wrapped our scarves across our mouth at the end of the party and bustled out the door. My friend Chris had just started hanging out with a guy who would soon be his husband, and I had a letter waiting for me at home from this cute writer in Ohio named Dustin. And yes, that was my husband. My friends and I huddled on the corner trying to hail a taxi, and some of us shuffled up the street to catch a train. But that evening was one of those magical New York City nights full of friends and good food. Our taste buds were tingly, mostly back to normal by the time our last group picked up a taxi, but I couldn't help but feel, for that evening at least, everything was still sweet. Thank you all. And now we'll take some questions.
Okay, so I do have some like warm-up questions, but I would rather hear from the audience, so I'm only going to use them if we need them, and plenty of you have questions, so we're going to go with the audience. Oh yeah, sorry, I'll be walking around so that they can use the mic. Okay, I saw a hand over here.
Hands. Remember, I've got mango stickers waiting for you, so be thinking of a good one. Yes.
Awesome. Hi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for showing up. My goodness, yeah.
My colleague and I are both high school teachers.
Oh, great.
And we use some of your essays as part of our little mini creative writing unit to get the students into creative writing. So you've already answered this question in a lot of ways today, but my question would just be, what would your advice be for young writers just getting started and dipping their toe into creative writing if they've never done it before, and how they can just sort of explore that?
Absolutely. Oh, I love that that question, and thank you both so much for teaching my work. That's been the greatest kind of joy is, when World of Wonders came out, it was Labor Day weekend of 2020. And my publisher had said, like, let's, what projects do you have next? That kind of thing, because we just didn't know about distribution. And that's also where I want to give a shout out to the librarians and teachers who were passing my book around like it was some underground, like they would wipe it off, they would, Clorox it and then hand it out in someone's mailbox. Amazon did not actually have my book in stock for almost a full year, but librarians and indie booksellers did. And so thank you so much. I really thought like my family would be reading that book and nobody else. But for writers, like I would have loved, I think back to my high school experience, I would have loved if I just had some open journaling questions. And I would get, just to give a little bit of guidance on that, is I would ask them to be as specific as possible. Use the 5 senses. I feel like if you ask someone, especially high school or early college, give me one of your favorite memories in general, and they'll say summer of 5th grade. And that's not very specific. But if you say like, what was a moment that involves water, age 12 and under, and who were you with? Where were you? What was the weather? That kind of thing. And say like, you can't stop until you hit all 5 senses, that kind of thing. It just naturally, the more specific you are, that's how you become more universal in your writing. So we just didn't do any free writes. It was always studying for the test or the quiz. And I just miss the journaling days. But I'll tell you, when I go to elementary schools, I never have to teach metaphor. I never have to teach wonder, because the kids, I'd say under age 10, automatically have questions. They automatically have wonderment. There was a boy in 3rd grade whose mother had passed away. And I did not know this when I visited the class, but his piece of writing that I've never forgotten said, I carry a cloud in my pocket, 1 cloud for me, 1 cloud for my mom. And I get like choked up thinking about it again. His teachers had told me, like, as soon as he said that, a bunch of people got up, and these are boys, little boys, got up and hugged him. And I was like, okay, that's a good metaphor, but dang, what's going on? It's not, I mean, come on, like I got more lessons to do. It turns out that was the first thing he had said in about 3 months in class. And it was just, I still think that's like the best thing. He beats my college students with coming up with metaphor then. And I said, like, just describe sadness. And that was his answer. I carry a cloud in my pocket, 1 for me, 1 for my mom. That's not because of me as a good teacher. That's just them naturally. So whatever we can do for kids to maintain that wonderment, that facility with metaphor. And I know it's like we're not supposed to somehow talk about feelings in school, and I reject that wholeheartedly. The college students I see who are having problems is because they have not talked about feelings in any aspect of school. And if we're putting them in school for 8 hours a day and they're supposed to be hiding their true feelings of being scared, happy, exhilarated, embarrassed, what are we doing to them? Is it any wonder that they come to college needing mental health services or having breakdowns when the first time they get an A-, that kind of thing. So you're doing so much good work already there, but I would just, whatever you can do to encourage free writes, bring back the free writes. It doesn't have to be tied to a test. Thank you, thank you. I'll have shorter answers now too. Yeah, oh, thank you, thank you. Let me see, yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for being here and sharing your experience.
Thank
great
you.
listening to you. I don't know if you ever experienced this, but when you are writing, have you ever asked yourself, everybody said everything so far, so what should I write?
Oh, daily, daily. Quite literally daily. I could show you, there's whole group chats. My friends are writers. Many of them are writers. And my writer group chat, it's all like, what are we doing? The world is, that meme. I don't know if you guys know memes, but my favorite one, I thought we were done with it. It's back. It's the little dog sitting, and there's flames around him. He's drinking coffee, and it said, "This is fine." Yeah, do you know that? That's my life on a daily basis. But I'm supposed to talk about wonderment and connecting and feeling tender. So when I say that it's a practice, it is a practice. One way that gets me out of it is to think of that 10-year-old Aimee sitting on the floor of a library and how much I just would have died to see the books that I'm writing now, So it's different for everybody, and you gotta, everybody has to find their own reason. But for me, it's just I'm writing the books that I always wished existed. I wish there were a book featuring an Asian American girl who has crushes and likes makeup and also has an encyclopedic knowledge of tropical flowers and stars. Usually the women, if I did find a book that featured a woman, they had no families or they didn't seem to like makeup. I'll just put it that way. And so I just wanted something that creates like someone who likes pop culture and who, heaven forbid, loves their parents, loves to spend time with their husband, doesn't try to escape their kids. Where were those books? There's so many books. You look on any of the memoirs that are out there, it's like kids who have weighed me down and I've finally broken free once they've graduated, or my husband has weighed me down. Where are the stories of like happy relationships? If you're a teen and you don't see any happy relationship in books or TV or movies, like what's going on? So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, but I assure you I have doubts on a daily basis. But one thing that helps me go on is that I just love books in general. And my hope is even if I never publish another book, I love writing. And it's so exhilarating when you have 26 letters and you can and everybody has access to 26 letters. And you can make whole worlds and poems and just such magic with 26 letters. So to me, it's like one of my favorite art forms. It doesn't get old in that way. Yeah. Thank you. Else. Hi there.
Hello? Oh, okay. Hey, Amy, I really loved your book. I've only got
you.
through half of it,
Okay.
but I'm
That's
a
great.
kind of a retired high-tech worker, and you talked about, some things here. But I guess my question is, I'm trying to offer like nature journaling in the community
Oh,
and
yeah.
to bring wonder
Oh,
to the community
fantastic.
here in Silicon Valley. Do you have any suggestions of how to start doing that and like trying to get people to know more about, building this kind of curiosity?
Yes, absolutely. One of my dear friends, I think he'd be mad if I called him the grandfather of nature journaling because he's a spry fellow, I'll say. But his name is John Muir Laws, if anyone knows that. If you know, yes. So he would take offense if I called him a grandpa. And I think it's johnmuirlaws.com. It's John, JOHNMUIR, like the nature writer, but then Laws is his true last name, LAWS.com. There's a whole, so for the nitty gritty on how to nature journal, that's the question. How do you get people in the community excited about nature journal? For the nitty gritty, I defer to him in terms of there's so many aspects there. I just came from Salt Lake City where they're like, well, we'll advertise because I wanted to do nature writing there in Salt Lake City. And they're like, I don't know how many come. And I was like, just tell them and they will, I promise you, because there's such a hunger for connection. There's a hunger to just be off screens. And they're like, okay, maybe there'll be 5, but I'll bring my husband or my daughter will come along. There was almost 100. And it was just from posting like in coffee houses and I don't even know exactly where. A couple museums, things like that, just to say, hey, no experience needed. You just need paper and a pen. It was in a pond, so there was actually a thing to write about. And I just said, we're going to stop 5 times around the pond. And each time we stop, you can go as fast or as slow as you want. You don't have to stay with me. I'm going to give you something to write about. And if you get stuck on one, just keep on going with me to the next stop, that kind of thing. I was so pleased at the turnout. And I've never had a case actually where there was not people who wanted to nature journal because I think the world is such a trash fire right now in some ways. We just need, and it's a little bit easier to be in community with people. You don't have to talk to anybody, just to be in someone's presence and just writing about that belted kingfisher, for example. Was so soothing. I mean, you'd have to ask one of the participants. I thought it was soothing, but the proof is in the attendance. And I think we lost 2 people because they had to go to work. But other than that, everybody stayed with me for the 5 stops around the pond. And these were anywhere from 10 to, I want to say 84. walking around the pond with me. So I love that community event. And I think some of my hosts were like, we're going to do this once a month and see, Yeah. Yeah.
It is noon already, but I'm going to let us do 2 more questions for the group. But then remember that Aimee will be here until 1 signing books, so you'll still be able to chat with her.
Yes, and you can ask questions there.
But we'll do 2 more questions for the group back here.
And as just before you get started, you had a question up here. Did you have a question? Yeah. Do you want the microphone?
Oh, I think the microphone's over here. So you come from one of the
We'll
most
get you right up.
interesting states, maybe not the happiest state in the union, but definitely one of the most interesting ones.
Can you repeat just the first part one more time?
Yeah, sure. You come from one of the most interesting states in America. Perhaps not the happiest, but definitely one of the most interesting ones. So you lived in different places. What can you tell us about how Mississippi is different and, quite frankly, better when it comes to teaching and when it comes to culture?
Ooh, that is an essay question right there. Well, I've been in Mississippi for 8 years, and they say to be, this is they, who knows, to be a true Southerner, you need a decade in the South, that kind of thing. So take what I say with a grain of salt. It is where I have a home, where I've raised where my husband and I raise our kids, where I set out bird feeders. So to me, that's home. And I pay taxes there. So I feel like I could speak a little bit for it. It is a very complicated state. And I spent my schooling years in the suburbs of Phoenix and Ohio, and in Western New York. I will say that I saw more Confederate flags in any of those states than I do in Mississippi. Now, that is not to say that Mississippi does not have its complications and frustrations for sure. But I live in Oxford, Mississippi, which is the university town of the state, the flagship school. And so that helps a little bit because I'm surrounded by people who read, frankly. And the culture there is such that when we have authors come to town, it is an event. That is the place to be. People get their hair done. And if people you start seeing on the square that has a Confederate statue, by the way, but you see people of all backgrounds filing into not a bar, but to a bookstore to see, John Grisham read or something like that, that kind of thing. And so for me as an author and as someone who is a mother as well, it's a vibrant place. I will also say that when my youngest was in 2nd grade, his very first field trip in the state of Mississippi was to, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name. Oh, the Lorraine Hotel. If anyone knows the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, it's where Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. And so, I was the accompanying parent and I was like, oh, good. I thought it was a little young, but, okay, fine. I was accompanying them and they did not pull any punches, like the museum, but also the incredible teachers of Mississippi. I thought there would be a sanitized version for 2nd graders. No, we were all out on the balcony. And the teacher, the museum guide and the teachers were saying, and look over there, count 1, 2, 3 windows. That's where an assassin shot JFK in the head and the chest. And, I was like, oh, wait, I thought I had a couple minutes to, bend down and tell my kid, like, hang on, there's going to be something scary here. But at first I was so upset, like, gosh, could you have just made it a little more gentle? But actually, I'm actually so glad because what I found in Mississippi more than any other school is that they are very upfront about it in their teachings. They don't, like in Ohio, it was so sanitized for me. And in Phoenix, it was so sanitized. It was like something bad happened and we lost Martin Luther King, like lost. I remember thinking like, where did he go? Like, is he playing hide and go seek? And so I say this not to make light of it, but to say that they're taught about the Ku Klux Klan. They're taught about, in our town, there's a place called Seven Corners, which is now a Thai food spot, but Seven Corners is where people were routinely lynched. They do not shy away from words like lynched and Ku Klux Klan and things like that. The places that shy away from that are New York, are Arizona, are Ohio, things like that. So I don't know. I don't have the child psychology background to know, is that good? Is it not good? But I know that raising my kids in Mississippi, they have I feel like they have the vocabulary in the awareness of like kind of their history. They know their history. I don't know what it's going to be like next year, but my youngest is now in 10th grade and my eldest is off to college already. But at least from when I was there in the 8 years, they were not shying away from history. So I'm always saddened when I hear books and stuff like that saying we're going to get rid of this in a museum, or we're going to say that someone was lost. That does nobody any good to say that someone was lost instead of actually what happened to them. So yeah, thank you for that question. We have a couple more here. Yeah.
Okay, Sharon, thank you for coming. And I want to
Thank
know,
you.
when did you start writing this book?
Say it one more time.
When did you start writing this?
When did I start writing books?
Yeah.
I started, thank you for the question. When did I start writing books? Right out of graduate school. I mean, I was at least trying. I got my first, I put together my first poetry book maybe 1 year after graduate school. So it seems pretty early. On the other hand, I also have been working nonstop at it. I will also say though that part of what keeps me in the classroom and writing is that I think I came to it late. Most of my friends from grad school, they had parents who were dictating every precious thing that they said and made little books. I had none of that. Now, my parents support me in other ways. They'd give me fruit. They'd give me, a shelter, things like that. But they were definitely not encouraging any art or anything like that. And to their credit, I don't think they knew how to do that, and that's okay. But I just always feel like, when people would talk in class, oh, this reminds me of this book that, Blessing the Boats by Lucille Clifton, for example, I'd be like, ah, yes, indeed. And I'd be writing down, look up Blessing the Boats by Lucille Clifton. So I would go right back to the library and like have to always play catch up. And I still feel like that. I mean, I never wanted to do that with chemistry. So that also was a tell. I just always wanted to learn and just, I couldn't wait to see what my favorite poets were putting out there. So I was supporting them whenever I could. But 2003 was my first collection out. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your questions.
Yes.
We are going to move on to the book signing part, just so you all have time.
I know there were so many good questions, but come up and see me and ask those questions.
Really quick before we move, I would like to take a group photo. So you can hold your book up, and if you don't want your face in your photo, you can put the book in front of your face.
There you go.
Spot,
No,
do you
that's
mind
great.
being in the aisle so you could be in it?
Do you want me to just stand?
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's all right. It'll just be
I
totally
did
natural.
I did not
Just my
warn.
everyday life, no problem.
Yes, I didn't warn Aimee about this. Thank you for being a good sport. All right, so hold those books up high. Yay. There's so many of you. I'll do two. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just have a couple closing announcements. Aimee, don't worry, you can take a seat. I won't put you on the spot again.
No worries.
Really quick, let's see. So yes, Aimee will be here until 1. I have some flyers in the back for the rest of our NEA grant programming that's going to be coming up, one of which is a nature journaling workshop in March, which sounds like you will all be interested in. If you're interested in discussing Bite by Bite with like a book club style discussion, we're going to be hosting book clubs at our Mission Branch Library on Saturday, October 11th, and at Northside Branch Library on Thursday, October 30th. Again, all the dates are over there. And Aimee shared some really great writing prompts during her presentation, which reminded me to tell you all that our culminating project for the NEA Big Read is that we are going to be publishing a book next year of Santa Clara work. Santa Clara community being a library member counts. You don't have to live in the city, but we're going to be doing recipes, artwork, and creative writing. So they should be about the themes of food or nature in line with Aimee's books. But yeah, if you wanted to take any of Aimee's writing prompts and submit to that, there's also information on the table and you can always ask me. I'll be here till 1 as well. Very, very important, please do take our survey that was sitting on your chair when you came in. There's pens on the table, there's extra surveys on the table. You can also scan the QR code if you want to do it electronically. You can put the paper surveys in the tray on the table. We're trying to make it easy for you. And now I'm going to let you get to Aimee. So thank you all so much for coming. That's
Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you.